or Montrez pas de blanche, and you will see Montrez pas de blanche is the expression actually representing a kind of a act that proves your credentials or your identity. So we may notice that the cases that put into question the inscribing of sex in IDs in our official documents are still statistically rare. We find about them in the media when they show the difficulties of transsexual persons as opposed to transgender individuals who perform their gender, or else the technical, that is to say administrative barriers in certain normative measures, such as an attempted correction and inscribing of a new sex in an ID or a birth certificate. I will not deal with the cultural, normative, and security reasons, for example, considering the public interest in protection against fraud when someone represents himself as a male or a female. I will not consider them. That cause only one of two sexes of a human being to be marked down in an ID. When many cultures actually practice 3 or even 5 different gender and sexual declarations, or on the basis of what is known about human sexuality in biology, as Anne Fausto Sterling suggests that there are at least 3 intersex, herm, merm, and firm. I will just try to offer a sort of an introductory remark for the eventual obsolescence of entering the sex in ID documents. My intention will also be to demonstrate to what extent sex and gender differ, each in their own way, when it comes to their, if any, ontological status, and why I will speak of a kind of a dynamic ontology embedded in becoming, rather than static ontology rooted in being. Quite recently, in May 2011, the International Association of Athletics Federations has approved the adoption of new rules and regulations governing the eligibility of females with hyperandrogenism to take part in women's competition based on a case of a South African runner, Caster Semenya. As it was reported in The Guardian, the decision of the IAA Council is the culmination of an 18-month-long review by an expert working group which has studied issues relating to the participation of female athletes with hyperandrogenism, a condition involving overproduction of male sex hormones. The aim of that working group was to avoid a repeat of the gender row which engulfed 800 runner Caster Semenya, who won at the World Championship in Berlin in 2009 and was subsequently sidelined from running as the IAAF looked into her high levels of testosterone. A remark is given that the competition in athletics will continue to be divided by gender, recognizing that there is a difference in sporting performance between elite men and women, predominantly due to higher levels of androgenic hormones in men. In this sense, a female with hyperandrogenism who is recognized as a female by law will be eligible to compete in women's competition in athletics, provided that she has androgen levels below the male range, measured by reference to testosterone levels in serum, or if she has androgen levels within the male range, that she also have an androgen resistance, which means that she derives no competitive advantage from such levels. Actually, the work of that expert group was initiated 20 years ago when Maria Patiño, Spain's top women hurdler, after passing through the femininity control office, failed the gender control. She may have looked like a woman, had a woman's strength, and never had reason to suspect that she wasn't a woman, but her DNA examination revealed XY cells and she was stripped of her medals, even though she was born with a condition known as androgen insensitivity syndrome that basically made her, by all appearances, female, just with recessed testicles, and wouldn't be apparent without a thorough medical exam. Despite the fact that Spanish officials asked her to fake an injury in order to bow competition, which she refused, she competed and won gold in 60 meters hurdles, collapsing at the finish line. After her DNA test result was revealed publicly, she returned to Spain in disgrace. Fighting for 2 years for reinstatement, she eventually won on the basis of her body condition, meaning that her 40 receptors actually made her resistant. We repeat the decision that we already heard, to the additional testosterone, and thus did not give her a competitive advantage. We may still remember a long list of Russian or East German female athletes showing quite astonishing characteristics of hyperandrogenism in early 70s and even 80s. But returning to the most recent report, the above-mentioned pool of international medical experts finally stipulated that a female athlete who declines, fails, or refuses to comply with the eligibility determination process will not be eligible to compete in a women's competition. In other words, in the world of social objects, the declaration of the performance of one's gender still guarantees the first step in proving one's credentials. All of which allows me to briefly refer to La Fontaine's parable of Montrez pas de blanche, to show one's white pole, from his fable, The Wolf, the Goat, and the Kid. The possibility to Montrez pas de blanche only repeats the matrix of the already existing paradigm of normativity, standardization, normalization, represented in one's documents in order to become part of a community based on convention, as opposed to, if any, ontological grounds. In other words, in a perverted way, this demonstration of one's credentials fits into the existing system of normative values. So I would like to share with you this reading of La Fontaine's fable, primarily as a kind of a thought experiment in which referring to sex, gender, identification, any act of identification may become contradictory and insufficient, not only in terms of its practical normativity, but also in a kind of an ontological sense. It's precisely in this sense that I use the word becoming, covering together concepts of being and time, and giving to the ontology a certain dimension of dynamism. And in using the gerund, the verbal noun of the verb to become, expressing the action as continuous, I'm actually following Deleuze's concept of devenir, much like many before me. But in order to further bolster La Fontaine's picturesque story with concrete examples from life, I can even accept the eventuality of a potential change of sex and gender of Casas and Mania. For it, during a subsequent substance control, the testosterone level in her blood may reveal much higher, and she might, just against her will, he, she, or her declaration, her key's declaration, become male. Far from competitive fields, publicity and press, there are people who express a tendency towards sex or gender change. They're known as intersex subjects, and again, like Anne Fausto-Sterling, I may confirm that the sex is a vast, infinitely malleable continuum that defies the constraints of certainly more than two categories that we recognize as male and female. Challenging this kind of categorization, it is precisely with this big concept of becoming that I mentioned. I will try to defend the idea of a kind of a dynamic ontology that allows queer subjects to thematize themselves and leaves them the freedom, actually, not to inscribe their sex and gender in their official IDs. But before that, I would like to remind you briefly of the La Fontaine. This was French. Oh, sorry. And this is English. As when the goat her pendant ducts to fill, and browsed the herbage of a distant hill, she latched her door and bid with matron care her kid, "My daughter, as you live, this portal don't undo to any creature who this watchword does not give. Jews take the wolf and all his race." The wolf was passing near the place by chance and heard the words with pleasure and laid them up as useful treasure. And hardly need we mention, escaped the goat's attention. No sooner did he see the matron off than he, with hypocritic tone and face, cried out before the place, "Jews take the wolf and all his race," not doubting thus to gain admission. The kid, not void of all suspicion, peered through the crack and cried, "Show me white paw before you ask me to undo the door." The wolf could not, if he had died, for wolves have no connection with paws of that complexion. So much surprised, our gormandizer retired too fast till he was wiser. What is La Fontaine saying about our identity when he moralizes and teaches what to do when an interloper is preparing to attack? How do we even arrive at the point requiring identification in order to pass from one world into another, in order to change place, enter into a new set of entities or into a new community, or even exit the old set of entities or community? Who are you? Where are you coming from? Are you black or white, guilty or innocent, short or tall, male or female? Show me your papers. What is changing and what stays unchanged in such circumstances, like in Kripke's semantics of possible words? Does belonging to different worlds still keep one identical? Does your sex, your gender, express as one of your essential properties? Is it possible to change your sex, to change your gender, and still remain identical? Consequently, what happens when you are technically enabled to change your name? Does it all depend on what you utter, how you declare yourself? Are you still the same? Are you identical? Or do you become your counterpart? How is this change reflected in your credentials? Like any good fabulist, La Fontaine sketches out a few, 2 or 3 strokes which are emphasized. They are not named, and being that the narrator is a proper moralist, only their general importance is emphasized. The wolf is evil and black, the kid goat white, candid, like in Rome, coming from Candidus white. He's a candidate, the elitist soldier, already chosen for the prestigious role in a community. Let us not forget that Roman candidates for public services were dressed in white toga. The kid is innocent, but also cunning in coming up with characteristics other than the password. That magical word, Jews take the wolf and all his race, Foin du loup et de sa race, which identifying the enemy links together the goat gender and enables one to belong to a community. Let us look briefly at the password. In the French original, it represents the archaic expression of disgust, contempt, and as a euphemism, the devil. Just like in the English translation, when it is announced through the word Jews, the double creature, the demon. The fable I just read is an authentic reworking by La Fontaine of an Aesop fable. Interestingly, over time, the reference to La Fontaine changed, and the fable itself has been transposed. Only the key moments remain throughout, and even these only heavily edited. The transition from black to evil, as well as white to innocent, is enhanced by the cunning which crosses onto the black side. For in one of the variants of the story, the cunning wolf becomes, because he's a double creature, a Jew, so adept on persisting in masquerading, conceives of such a bestiality in order to pass for a goat that it dips its paw in white flour. This transition of gestures is always quick, and we could easily say that it speeds up as the story moves and time passes. Information and impressions abound, and the sudden reversal is drawn in a quick move, leaving the kid even more vulnerable while we increasingly identify with it. On the other hand, it is hardly imaginable what is going through the wolf's mind, like in Jeremiah. Can the Ethiopian change his skin, or the leopard his spots? In Serbian we say vuk kožu menja, ali čud ne menja. Ili već nešto tako slično. In other words, regardless of the change in its manifestation, the fable warns us that it is impossible to escape one's essence, its wolf's essence, this foremost figure of its appearance in the world. So it's obvious that La Fontaine is a master of a dialogue, for it is in the dialogue that he achieves the exceptional persuasion, vividness, powerful psychology and drama. The word is, even when uttered by the animal, the key to the resolution of the whole situation. However, it is not only the uttered words which are problematic in the personification. Despite signifying mobility and changeability, despite constantly varying through rhetorical figures, words refer to fixed essences. But they also refer to doubled essences. A seemingly truthful tale about a terrified attempt at survival becomes a symbolic protocol of identification where specific entities are divided. In La Fontaine's fable between wolf and goat, already enriched by their properties, good, bad, naive, candid, cunning, that leave their traces in written documents. And so it is not enough to utter one's name, one must also furnish material evidence, however piled up and redundant, material evidence of belonging. In case of humans, given name, family name, race, gender, occupation, height, weight, color of eyes. Which gender, which sex do I belong to, and how important is that in recognition of my role in a particular community? So we ought to wonder then to what extent does ontology guarantee the criteria based on which we differentiate sex and gender? Commonsensically, there are many similarities and differences among male and female. Caster Semenya, the runner of 1800 meter, and Usain Bolt, the sprinter, are both athletes. They can both be classified as such, as we know that insofar as our classificatory purposes may vary, the gender of one system may be the differential of another. For example, athletes and mind sport players are generically humans, but differentially to athletes who use their physical strength, mind sport players use mental abilities. It is conceivable that Semenya or Bolt can run and be trained. They can undergo medical treatments. But is it conceivable that after a period of time, one of them change sex and still compete? As soon as we understand that there are two significantly different families of dual phenomena, such as male and female sex, distinguished also by their specific relations, the vast field of ontological duality emerges despite the material facts provided in sciences. Well known are numerous categorical dualities which are operational not only in mathematics, like finite or infinite, and discrete continuous, but also in the epistemic grounds of almost all sciences, with the exception of biology. The male-female category figures in the same register as matter, form, nature, culture, potential, act, quality, quantity, one, many, identity, difference, individual, universal, part, whole. And during the whole history of different phases of 20th century feminism, it was precisely the theme of duality that was at the center of interest of many critiques. In particular, French feminism coming out of linguistics, psychoanalysis, structuralism, and post-structuralism was largely based and grew out of taking apart and deconstruction of the Cartesian model of the split between mind and body, between those dualities. However, instead of the ontological status of this duality, the engagement and emancipatory enthusiasm of the feminists ensured that the attempt to arrive at a new model of the community was made through a political and epistemological critique, more or less. And after French feminism moved to America, and American feminists came out with a critique of their precursors, opposing, as they call it, naturalism and essentialism, and considering gender above all as a social construct, striving to overcome this dualistic categorization. It was precisely the development of cognitive sciences, biology and philosophy of biology, that brought back the question of essence and its manifestations. It is truly no longer enough to make the distinction that Aristotle made between male and female based exclusively on properties of each. It is now necessary to establish nearly mathematical models to determine femininity or masculinity. Biology is to a much greater extent marked with ontological characterizations and surpasses pure materiality. So I have spent some time on La Fontaine's fable to indicate how natural and normal it is to want to belong to the protected mass of the big mainstream body of togetherness. Therefore, I'm not surprised by the need of wolves to dip their paws into flour, thin their voices to be what they are not. Of course, many wolves want to be satiated and not to have to pass through interminable questionings and rejections of identifications. Wolves, too, would like to establish their norms, their measures of value, and their roadmaps. The problem occurs when they do it emulating the existing paradigms. The problem also occurs when they are unable to articulate their need in a new way. This is why bridging the gap between the essentialist, which is known as a sexual difference, différence sexuelle, and constructionist or gender models, I wish to refer to Deleuze's concept of devenir, becoming, a sort of simultaneous coming and going in a borderland zone between two ends. This is somehow a summary of Deleuze. Becoming describes the continual production or return of difference immanent within the constitution of events, whether physical or otherwise. It is a pure movement evident in changes between particular events. Still, becoming does not represent a phase between two states or a range of terms. As continuous and alive, which allows us to recognize Bergson and his conceptual life in the background of the continuity. Becoming is the very dynamism of change that tends to no specific goal. In that sense, becoming is a kind of being that avoids the practice of montrer patte blanche, or showing one's credentials, or any necessarily false act of identification, since the identity process will be truly only in case if every individual provides, for example, its genome. Instead of declaring anyhow insufficient sex or gender identity in IDs, we may suppose a different kind of a document that will correspond to one's unique ID, which is a genome. Of course, we can also insist upon the fact that one should always show the same white paw or non-white paw, but one can cunningly decide to play with others and to play with him, herself, and put his paw into the flower. In the sense, the production of subjectivity is not based on any prescribed code, but is creative, a kind of an artistic act, and also includes ethical and aesthetic dimensions punctuated by moments when being white or black, that is male or female, simply would no longer make sense. The human experience per se is to be considered as a condition of possibility, or the inventive potential, as the Deleuzian scholar Brian Masumi wrote in 1992, of becoming other, that is different from the present self. The dynamism of becoming, describing the process in which any given multiplicity changes in nature, it as it expands its connections. This is Deleuze and Guattari. Becoming, while taking place in a gap created by non-place, is nonetheless a zone of indetermination, indiscernibility of sets of living creatures, same as sets of things, beasts, and persons. It seems that one such action could be in the effort coming on the heels of the long struggle to establish positive differences between gender and sex, to finally arrive at raising the gender and sexual marking to a more general level and completely be left out from identification processes. So I finish my presentation in suspense and question, what are then ontological reasons for having our sex written out in our IDs? Even with contemporary technology, are unique forms of identification possible that would rid us of any discriminatory practices? And actually, yesterday I read a paper in American Scientist about sexless baby. So there is a kind of tendency that happened in Canada, but it's also tendency in the United States. Certain avant-garde couples raise their babies and not letting them know which sex do they belong. So, for example, we are a couple and we have a baby, and we don't want to to know our baby which sex it is, he or she. And so this makes us again a kind of a Gedankenexperiment, inventing the whole range of protocols, of conventions, new conventions, this time in a normative field, that allows us these kind of conventions allow us to build some kind of a new community, and overpassing the possibility of this ancient story of dualism. And well, this sounds like a utopia for the moment, but I dare think that maybe in 22nd, if we survive 22nd and 23rd century, the gender or sex as a as a convention. I'm not speaking about chromosomes. I'm not speaking about hormones. I'm speaking about the representation of sexual or gender markers. They will just vanish. They will disappear. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Sanja, for this.
Thank you for being a couple.